From 4 men on a camping trip being followed by a beam of light, all experiencing intense dreams of being experimented on by alien beings, to police officers having their whole squad cars engulfed in strange lights from the sky and forgetting huge stretches of time. These are terrifying alien abduction stories governments tried to cover up. In August of 1976, 4 men went on a camping trip in the Allagash Wilderness in Maine. Jack and Jim Weiner, along with Chuck Rack and Charlie Foltz, were off on what was supposed to be this peaceful getaway when things took a turn. On their second night, Jim spotted a bright object in the sky. It was there for about 30 seconds, then it disappeared. Not super out of the ordinary in the deep woods, the sky is just lit up with stars at night. Easy to misidentify things, but 2 nights later, while they were out fishing, the same bright object appeared a second time. Chuck noticed it at first. It looked super intense. This time, it was almost like the sun, they said, and they watched it as it followed them along the water. Charlie, thinking it was some kind of signal, even tried to flash an SOS to the object. And that's when things got really weird. They described this light shooting a beam down towards them, which followed them all the way back to shore. And when they got back to their campsite, something else was off. The fire they'd left burning was completely out, and they felt totally exhausted, like they'd been gone for hours. The next few days were uneventful, and they didn't see the light again, but after they got back home, the men started having these disturbing nightmares, often about sitting naked on a bench, feeling afraid. That night stuck with the men, but it wasn't until 1988 that they finally had had enough and decided to seek out answers. Jim reached out to UFO researcher Ray Fowler, and they all agreed to undergo hypnosis to try and make sense of these strange memories. And under this hypnosis, each man recalled being abducted by aliens. They described terrifying beings practicing medical exams on them, even having their skin and bodily fluids taken. Later, when they compared notes, they realized that their memories matched up exactly. They even passed polygraph tests. On the night of October 11th, 1973 in Pascagoula, Mississippi, 2 men, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, had a terrifying encounter they were never able to explain. While fishing off a pier by the Pascagoula River, they heard a strange whirring sound and saw flashing blue lights. Next thing they knew, an oval-shaped object about 30 to 40 feet across appeared above them. They were completely paralyzed as 3 bizarre creatures with robotic slit mouths and crab-like pincers took them aboard the craft. Once inside, Hickson and Parker claimed the creatures performed some kind of examination on them. They both stayed silent for years about the details, but Hickson eventually opened up, even writing a book in 1983 about the encounter. Parker was quieter at first, but started attending UFO conventions, and in 2018, he released his own book, giving his side of the story for the first time. In 2019, the site of the abduction was marked with a plaque to honor the event, and Parker, deeply emotional, said he wanted to be buried there someday. Hickson passed away in 2011, but Parker continued to speak about the encounter until his death in 2023. Of course, some say the 2 made this story up, but what if they didn't? What if something actually happened to these 2 men that they were never able to forget? And writing it all down and sharing their story with the world was their only way of working through something that they couldn't even begin to understand. In 1979, Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson from Marshall County, Minnesota, had a strange encounter while on patrol. On the night of August 27th, around 2 a.m., he saw a beam of light just above the road near Stephen, Minnesota. The light shot toward him and engulfed his squad car. Johnson reported hearing glass breaking before losing consciousness. When he came to, 39 minutes had passed. The car's windshield was shattered, one of the headlights and the red emergency light were damaged, and the radio antenna was bent. When backup deputies arrived, they found Johnson's squad car sideways on the road. He had bruises and eye irritation, which a doctor later compared to burns from a welder's torch. When Johnson's story came out, it gained a lot of attention. All it did was make matters worse, though. Johnson would later say it, understandably, caused a lot of emotional distress for him and his family. Till this day, nobody knows exactly what happened that night, but part of me wonders if he just got into a car accident and was too embarrassed to admit it. Not to ruin the party or anything, but I don't know. What do you all think of this one? This next one is really weird, so strap in. So in 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Vilas Boas had one of the craziest nights of his life. On October 15th, while working late in the fields, he spotted this bright red star-like object in the sky. The object came down, eventually landing. It was an egg-shaped craft, and from it came these humanoid figures. They were about 5 feet tall with small blue eyes and white hair, and they were dressed in what looked like these gray overalls or equipment, and they had these helmets on. Before he knew it, Antonio was grabbed and taken aboard the craft. Once inside, the aliens took samples of his bodily fluids and performed a whole series of other medical examinations. Then they led him into another room, where he was introduced to a female humanoid, according to him, a very attractive one. He described her as having small round eyes, white hair, and a human-like appearance. And after some strange interactions, you can guess what happened next. And once the bizarre encounter was over, the craft released him back into the field and took off. Antonio, understandably shaken, eventually told his family about it. Not sure how that conversation would have gone, but I'm gonna assume it was awkward. His story soon caught the attention of the Brazilian military and the media. People had a lot of questions. Some thought his story was incredible. Some just laughed him off. But Antonio stuck by his story all the way up until his death in 1991. On September 3rd of 1965, 18-year-old Norman Muscarello was hitchhiking home along Route 150 in New Hampshire. Around 2 a.m., he saw 5 bright red lights hovering above the trees. At first he thought they were police or fire lights, but when he got closer he realized the lights were coming from a massive object around 80 to 90 feet wide, but somehow was completely silent. Panicking, he drove into a ditch and watched in horror as this object started moving toward him before changing direction and hovering over a nearby farmhouse. Norman ran to a neighbor's house for help, but he got no response. Eventually he flagged down a car and was driven to the local police station, where he told Officer Reginald Toland about what he saw. Toland was already familiar with Muscarello and he took him seriously. He radioed Officer Eugene Bertrand to investigate, and when they went back to the sighting location, the object did appear again, hovering silently and rocking back and forth. The officers just stood there completely stunned, not knowing what to do, before the thing disappeared. After the police reported the incident, the Air Force investigated, but their helpful explanation was that it was just stars or a military exercise. Muscarello and the officers weren't so convinced, nor are a lot of people who've heard about the story in the years since. In 1961, Betty and Barney Hill, a couple from New Hampshire, became one of the most famous cases of alien abduction. After a vacation, they were driving home when they noticed this strange light in the sky. At first, Betty thought it was a falling star, but it moved erratically and it was getting larger and brighter. Eventually, Barney decided to just pull over so they could take a look. As they watched, Betty saw some sort of craft with multicolored lights moving across the moon. They continued to stare for a while, but what happened next nearly gave them a heart attack. Suddenly, the craft dropped down toward their car and just hovered above it. Barney stepped out and, using binoculars, he looked up to see a bunch of what he said were humanoid figures inside this craft. One figure seemed to communicate with him telepathically, warning him to stay where he was. Terrified, Barney ran back to the car and the couple just sped off. As they drove away, they heard a strange beeping sound, and then they lost track of time, suddenly finding themselves near Concord hours later than they'd expected. When they got home, they noticed other odd things too. Their clothes were damaged, their watches had stopped working, and there was a strange pink powder on Betty's dress. The Hills couldn't explain what had happened, and both underwent hypnosis sessions later on, which revealed eerie, consistent memories of an alien abduction. On December 1st, 1987, a retired police officer known only as Spencer to the press was out for a walk in Ilkley Moor in England. While climbing a small hill, he saw a strange figure ahead of him, about 4 feet tall, dark green, with an oversized head and long, thin arms. The figure made a gesture that seemed to warn Spencer to stay back, but instead he took out his camera and he snapped a photo. The creature then ran off. Spencer followed but lost track of it in the fog. That's when Spencer saw a craft rise from the moor. He said it had 2 saucer-shaped parts stacked on top of each other, and that it hummed loudly as it disappeared into the sky. At this point, Spencer decided that his walk was over and he started heading to town, only to realize he was hours later than he should have been. His compass was also pointing in the wrong direction. In the days that followed, Spencer reached out to UFO researchers Jenny Randles and Peter Howe. photograph Spencer took was examined by experts, and while it couldn't be proven to be fake, it was also too grainy for any real conclusion either. According to UFOologist Nick Redfern, Spencer was also visited by two men in black who apparently intimidated him into staying silent. On the night of August 21st, 1955, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a bizarre incident took place that has gone down as one of the craziest cryptid reports of all time, at least that I've read about. A group of 12 people who'd been staying at their small family farm rushed to the local police station saying that they had been under attack by small, alien-looking creatures. They claimed these creatures were about 3 to 4 feet tall and were peeking into their farmhouse windows and doorways, and that they'd been fighting them off for hours. And this all happened after they saw some weird light descend into the trees by the farmhouse. So two adults, Elmer Sutton and Billy Ray Taylor, described seeing short, dark figures popping up and even tried to hold them off with gunfire. Soon police, state troopers, and military personnel from nearby Fort Campbell showed up to investigate. What they found were signs of gunfire and holes in the farmhouse's windows and door screens, but no sign of any creatures. The following day, the family packed up and they left the farmhouse. The mysterious creatures were never seen again. November of 1979, Robert Taylor, a forestry worker from Scotland, had an encounter that left him badly shaken and injured. Taylor had gone for a walk near Dutchmont Law, a wooded area in Livingston, when he'd claimed to see a strange flying dome. He described the object as a large metallic sphere about 7 yards in diameter, hovering above the ground. It also had a rough sandpaper-like texture and small propellers on its rim. According to Taylor, the thing sprouted smaller spheres, which he compared to sea mines, that started dragging him toward the larger object. Then everything went black. When he came to, the strange craft and smaller objects were gone. Taylor tried to start his truck, but it wasn't working, so he walked home. When he got home, his wife was in shock. Taylor was disheveled, his clothes were torn, and he had grazes on his chin and thighs. The police were called, and after examining the site, they found odd marks in the ground, which Taylor said were caused by these strange objects. Finally, in November of 1980, Alan Godfrey, a police constable in West Yorkshire, was responding to reports of cattle roaming a council estate when he saw this strange diamond-shaped light hovering above the road. It was about 20 feet high and 14 feet wide, rotating slowly. He tried to radio for backup, but his equipment suddenly wasn't working. And then, just like that, the object vanished. Godfrey found himself 30 yards down the road. He was unable to explain where the last 30 minutes had gone. He also had a split boot and a strange red mark on his foot. Later, under hypnosis, Godfrey recalled being hit by a beam of light, causing him to lose consciousness. He remembered then waking up inside a room being examined by small, non-human beings and a more humanoid figure. Godfrey would later say it was possible the whole thing was a dream, but at the time, he felt very strongly that what he experienced was real. He also thought the experience led to his early retirement from the police force.
Starting off our list today, we have a 2018 UFO sighting that took place in the skies above North Carolina. Shout out to anyone watching from Elon University. In August of 2018, a man named Javion Hill claims to have spotted a UFO while driving home on US 74 just southwest of Charlotte. He described seeing lights in the clouds above him, shaped like a square. Immediately, he pulled out his phone and began snapping photos, which I have to admit are pretty convincing. After hovering in the sky above Javion for a good amount of time, the illuminated formation just vanished into thin air, as they do. You know how it is. It was as though it had never existed in the first place, but of course it did because there's proof, and we've seen it. And Hill, who says he was never a believer in aliens before that night, claims that during the time in which the object was hovering above him, he was seriously concerned for his safety.
On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, saw something in the sky near Mount Rainier in Washington, something that he couldn't quite explain. He described 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation. What really caught his attention was how fast these things were moving, at around 1,700 miles per hour, which was faster than any known aircraft at the time. And when Arnold reported what he saw, it ended up getting massive media coverage. The Kenneth Arnold sighting is often referenced as the first big UFO encounter in modern times. After Arnold's sighting, lots of other reports started coming in about strange things in the sky across the United States. The government and military were getting intrigued, and the US Air Force started Project Sign, which was the first official government investigation into UFOs. This later became Project Blue Book, which looked into thousands of UFO sightings to try and figure out what was going on. So is it just one of these cases where he saw something and then everybody else started like getting excited and, just thought they were seeing things? Or was this just the time where UFOs and aliens were starting to come down to investigate things here on Earth?
Next up, we have two commercial pilots on different aircrafts claiming to have seen a mysterious flying object in the sky while flying above Arizona on February 24th of 2018. The first pilot to spot the UFO called into radio traffic control to ask if another plane had passed by him. The controller answered no, and then went on to make a joke about the pilot having possibly seen a UFO. Ground control then contacted another pilot flying an American Airlines flight a little bit behind the first plane and asked the pilot to inform the control center if an aircraft were to pass over the plane. And a short while later, the pilot did exactly that. He said that a fast object had flown 3,000 feet over his plane in the opposite direction of which he was going. Once again, ground control had no knowledge of the aircraft, and it didn't show up on any of the radars either. Both pilots later described the objects as illuminated and incredibly fast, saying that they were nothing like the weather balloons they had seen sometimes floating at that altitude before. Plus, there were no records of this object, so what could it have been? Well, a UFO, duh.
Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was the lead investigator of Project Blue Book in the 50s. His job was to investigate reports of UFOs and find any possible explanation for them. Of course, if there was none, it would be categorized as a genuine UFO. French had shot down a lot of UFO reports over the course of his career, but in 1952, he witnessed something himself, something he could only describe as a genuine alien encounter. He kept what he'd seen a secret for decades. It wasn't until 2013 that he testified before 6 former members of Congress in DC, describing an event that happened back in 1952. A number of residents off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, had reported spotting 2 unidentified flying objects. So French was tasked with heading over to Canada to basically debunk it. The UFOs had crashed into the water, and when Lieutenant Colonel French arrived, he saw this crowd of about 100 people, including some police, standing by a wharf, gawking at something in the water. French made his way over, and when he looked down into the clear water below, he saw what looked like 2 large circular aircraft-like objects, and there were apparently 2 beings working on them. French described the creatures as, quote, 2 to 3 feet tall, light gray in color, very thin, long arms with either 2 or 3 fingers, the top of their heads much wider than their jawline. Their eyes were very slanted, and you couldn't see pupils in them. He then described the objects slowly rising out from the water before abruptly accelerating and taking off into the sky.
Next up, we have the very first record of a UFO encounter to take place in New England, USA, which I bet you didn't know was actually a major hotspot for extraterrestrial UFO and UAP activity. That's unidentified aerial phenomena, for those of you who don't know. The first recorded sighting happened in Boston, New England, and it was also the first ever documented sighting in the US as a whole. It took place in 1639, and credible reports have been popping up ever since. The record was a second-hand observation recorded by colony founder and governor at the time, John Winthrop, who wrote that a sober, discreet man had seen the sky above Boston become illuminated by a green light while he was rowing his boat along the river one evening. The light was still for a moment and appeared to be flaming, and then it morphed its shape and darted off into the night sky towards Charlestown. The encounter lasted for 3 hours, with the object in the sky going higher into the air and then rushing down closer to Earth again and again, back and forth. By the time it ended, which it did when the object just disappeared into the night, the man along with his boatmates had traveled 1 mile upstream with absolutely no memory of how they had gotten there.
This next one has to be the wildest alien encounter case in recent history. So in March of 2023, something strange went down in a small Bolivian village called Horania. It all started with reports of a mysterious green light hovering in the sky. People whipped out their phones to capture the event, having no idea what the hell they were looking at. But unlike a lot of your typical UFO cases, this one doesn't just end with people seeing something strange in the sky. Things get way weirder. So 2 days later, residents claimed to have seen tiny beings darting around the town at night. One villager, Rita Marquez, described them as little and almost like goblins. Some locals even claimed to have found one of these small creatures dead in a gutter one morning, only for its body to vanish soon after. So, a lot to unpack here. Strange lights, possible aircraft, little beings running around the streets at night, and even a mysterious disappearance of one of these dead creatures. I don't know what to make of this case. Whenever there's a whole bunch of witnesses like this, I find it very interesting though.
Next up, we have Barney and Betty Hill's extraterrestrial encounter, which took place on September 19th of 1961 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where the couple claimed to have been abducted by aliens. The ordeal started when the pair saw a bright light in the sky around 10:30 p.m. while driving home after a night out. Betty asked Barney to stop the car so that they could get a better look. He did, and then pulled out a pair of binoculars. What they saw was a massive, oddly shaped spacecraft with multicolored lights. They tried to drive away, but the spaceship, which they believed to have been at least 40 feet long, followed them, getting closer and closer until it was hovering directly in front of the pair's car. Barney claims he was able to clearly make out 6 to 8 humanoid figures standing on the ship who instructed Barney and Betty not to move, but rather to just keep looking towards the ship. The next thing the pair remembered, they had driven 35 miles away from their destination with no recollection of doing so. They tried to write down as much as they could about the experience on their way home, but their memories quickly became fragmented. It wasn't until years later, under hypnosis, that the pair separately both recalled being taken onto the ship and then separated from one another and examined by the humanoid alien life forms. In the days after the incident, however, both Betty and Barney's watches stopped working, and Barney noticed tiny, circles on the back of his truck, and when he put his compass near them, it went haywire. So, I'm not saying they were telling the truth, but I think they might have been telling the truth.
This next story is very outlandish, but it's an entertaining story, and I haven't talked about it before, so here it goes. Back in 2021, Angelina Lynn Johnston held a news conference in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Johnston claims to be a former retired defense intelligence officer who had an encounter with various alien species at a secret base in the Mojave Desert. She claimed that in January of 2010, a few years before she ran as a Democrat candidate for South Dakota Senate, she had met up with a couple in South Carolina who ended up taking her to this secret base. She didn't provide details on exactly where the base was in the desert, but said that she would be taking an astronaut along with a few scientists to the base, which had been built into the side of a mountain. She described seeing various alien species, including one that looked a bit like a praying mantis type creature, and that the beings all spoke to her through telepathy.
Next up, we have the Exeter incident, which took place in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1965 and actually inspired a best-selling novel, Incident at Exeter: Unidentified Flying Objects Over America Now, by John G. Fuller. Not sponsored. One evening in Exeter, a police officer patrolling Highway Route 101 stopped to check on a woman parked on the side of the road. When he asked her what was wrong, she answered in breathless hysterics. She claimed that a large red flying object with flashing lights had been chasing her. Just a few hours later, the police heard a similar story from another man, a hitchhiker who claimed to have seen 5 bright lights in the sky while walking along Route 150. He told officers that they had been about 100 feet away from where he had stood, and he watched as they hovered over a home before moving over to the airspace above a large field, and then disappearing and reappearing several times. Curious, one of the policemen went with the hitchhiker back to the spot where he claimed to have seen the UFOs, and sure enough, there it was. And another officer arrived shortly after to see the exact same thing. 5 bright lights high up in the sky disappearing into and reappearing from the trees over and over again. And then, over the next few weeks, authorities in Exeter received almost 60 other reports of UFO sightings in the area. So, if you like aliens and UFOs and Exeter was not on your bucket list, you might want to rethink that decision.
Finally, we have a case where 3 UFOs hijacked a pilot's plane in midair. This is about as disturbing a close encounter as it gets, as this man just narrowly escaped death. The pilot's name is Carlos de los Santos. In 1975, he'd been flying back to Mexico City. It was just another routine flight until it wasn't. Carlos spotted something on his right wing. It was this silver disc-like object about 13 feet in length. It was just right on top of the wing. Then he saw an identical object on top of his left wing. And as if that wasn't enough, a third object appeared, and this one was heading straight for him. In a panic, Carlos tried to steer his plane away, but the controls weren't responding. Luckily, the object just missed him though. He frantically radioed air traffic control, explaining that he'd lost control and was surrounded by these strange disc objects. And then, to his complete and utter horror, the plane suddenly veered completely off course. It was now ascending higher and higher up into the sky. Carlos had absolutely no control over the plane now. But then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the strange objects flew away. And miraculously, thankfully, Carlos regained control of the aircraft. And we're going to start things off with Point Dume underwater base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. Looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above, it's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking. And right here, for 2 miles, it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a dome stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site." Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have Hy Brasil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen seen strange creatures and these glowing god-like beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included Hy-Brasil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the islands appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote in the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across two chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied. Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years, the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to Ancient Aliens. Thank you, Ancient Aliens. But apparently, there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades, which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945 when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into into my car. One morning I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them. Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently, as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disc passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15th, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be digging through my backyard finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. How did he get that job? Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
Number 10. Triangle object. The Defense Department has confirmed that leaked photos and videos of an unidentified aerial phenomenon taken in 2019 are indeed legitimate images of unexplained objects. Photos and videos of triangle-shaped objects blinking and moving through the clouds were taken by Navy personnel, Pentagon spokeswoman Sue Go said in a statement to CNN. She also confirmed that photos of 3 unidentified flying objects, one spear-shaped, another acorn-shaped, and one characterized as a metallic blimp were also taken by Navy personnel. As we have said before, to maintain operation security and to avoid disclosing information that may be useful to potential adversaries, DoD does not discuss publicly the details of either the observations or the examinations of reported incursions into our training ranges or designated airspace, including those incursions initially designed as UAP, she said. She also said that the Identified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, created to investigate UFO sightings observed by the military, has included these incidents in their ongoing examinations. Number 9. Drone footage. On April 19, 2023, the Pentagon released another video featuring MQ-9 drone footage from the Middle East depicting a UAP. In the footage dated July 12, 2022, which the US Defense Department shared online, the US military's MQ-9 Reaper drone somewhere in the Middle East, exactly where wasn't disclosed, can be seen monitoring a strange metallic silver orb-like object flying around below it at some seemingly high speeds while the drone's camera tries to follow it. This footage is significant because while there have been previously declassified US military footage of UFOs, those were all taken by pilots in manned aircrafts. This one, however, was taken by a drone. However, this isn't the only time this particular UFO has been seen. Apparently, there has been many other sightings of a strange metallic orb in the Middle East. Sean M. Kirkpatrick, director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, told a Senate Armed Services subcommittee that it resembled a small metallic orb. He added there isn't an explanation for, but the reason for is due to lack of available data. It is going to be virtually impossible to fully identify that just based on that video, he said, according to ABC News. Number 8. ADAR. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of news reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of these events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has received 366 reports of UAP. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred before March 2021 but hadn't been included in the earlier report. The new numbers indicate a steep rise in UAP sightings. Now, the report released in June 2021 lists just 144 reports covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to the US government's effort to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize the potential risks the phenomenon poses, both with aviation hazard and potential advisable activity, such as foreign surveillance efforts. Number 7. Dancing lights. On January 29, 2023, Canadian air traffic controllers and pilots couldn't identify two white lights moving in a circular pattern reported over Canada's Northwest Territories. Good evening, just wondering, do you got two planes that are just to the east of your field doing circuits or maneuvers? A crew member aboard a Canadian North flight headed to Yellowknife asked air traffic controllers. Negative, I have no reported traffic in the area. The Yellowknife air traffic controller replied, do you have a visual on something? The crew responded somewhat hesitantly, yeah, we're looking at two lights dancing around here to the east of your field. They're above us about I don't know what. We're not seeing them on the TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, but we can see lights moving around. Then there's a pause before the crew member on the radio back say, we're not crazy. No, we believe you, the air traffic controller replies, and the sighting remains unexplained. Number 6. Over New Mexico. On February 21st, 2021, a pilot flying over New Mexico at the altitude of 37,000 feet reported seeing a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type thing moving really fast over the top of them, according to published audio. American Airlines confirmed that the radio transmission came from flight 2292. The FAA a few days later stated, a pilot reported seeing an object over New Mexico shortly after noon local time on Sunday, February 21st, 2021. FAA air traffic controllers did not see any objects in the area of their radar scopes. Seems like air traffic can never see these objects, but the pilots can, and I can't tell if that's better or worse. Number 5. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18th, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in that area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m. p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when somewhere around Mansfield they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled a car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object they said looked like a blimp, pear-shaped and as big as a school bus. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding on the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about a strange low-flying light in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Township police officers to investigate, and one of them was Sergeant Toby Maloro, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all, and the object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, the sergeant decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. In total, at least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object at night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. Navy pilots. Recently, 2 former Navy pilots were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during a training exercise but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. In an interview with NBC News, Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then when the pilot got within half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. My question is, what was he going to do if he got closer? This whole story is just crazy. Number 2. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed UAP with his own eyes, has called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious object spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects in our airspace, and these were not mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These were no mere balloons, they could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means of lift or control surfaces, in other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have a clear understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with. If we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear. If there are things over our head and we're not sure what they are, well, we need to figure it out. If they're adversarial, it's a national security issue, we have mechanisms for that. If it's not a national security issue, then it's not an adversarial platform, then it's a matter for scientific inquiry. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this scares me a little bit. And coming in at number 1 is leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage obtained by a documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News appeared to show a mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Amsa Combat Information Center, according to the filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appears to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San Diego before it vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. video. The Defense Department confirmed that the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said it will be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, a panel established last year to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects.
And we're kicking off this list with the Navy UFO sighting. So back in 2020, the Pentagon released video footage taken by United States naval aviators of strange objects hurling through the sky. They moved in ways no known aircraft does, and pilots described them seeming to defy the laws of physics. In these series of videos, they're completely confused and shocked about what they're seeing. The videos were recorded back in 2004, so the Pentagon were holding on to these for a long time, and the fact that they were finally released really says something about how much of this could be going on. They can't keep it under wraps any longer. It's getting to the point now where even the government is like, yeah, people kind of need to be informed about at least some of it. I mean, who knows what they're still hiding though. If you're liking the channel so far, by the way, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We got awesome content coming at you on the daily. At number 9 is the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting. This is one of the most important UFO sightings in history. It happened on June 24th, 1947, and is a pivotal event in the history of UFOs. Now, NASA has not been established at this point, but the event made a huge impact on government policy regarding unidentified flying objects. Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, reported seeing 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation near Mount Rainier in Washington. He estimated their speed at around 1,700 miles per hour, much faster than any known aircraft at the time, and Arnold's sighting received widespread media coverage, leading to increased public interest in UFOs. And this event is often considered the first modern-day UFO encounter. In the following weeks, there were numerous reports of UFO sightings across the United States, leading to the coining of the term flying saucer. This case also had a huge impact on government and military agencies. The US Air Force initiated Project Sign, the first official government investigation into UFOs. This eventually led to the formation of Project Blue Book, a long-running study of UFO sightings. So, this sighting not only heavily contributed to the curiosity surrounding UFOs and aliens that continues to this day in pop culture, but also contributed to the scientific inquiry and government policy when it comes to UAPs. Next up, we have Frank Shaw's gargoyle. So this one isn't your standard UAP in that it's a winged cryptid sighting, but it was seen by multiple NASA employees at the time, primarily Frank Shaw, who worked in Houston's Johns Space Center. On the night of the incident, Shaw was on his way back to his car at the end of his shift when he spotted something strange. It was what looked to be a massive winged humanoid creature perched on one of the Space Center buildings, almost like a gargoyle or bat creature, and suddenly it started unfurling its wings, which Shaw described making this crackling sound before it swooped into the air. Shaw was just stunned, unable to move, having no reference for what he had just witnessed. Suddenly he snapped out of it though, and he rushed to his car. Now, if this were just a one-time thing, I'd be like, alright, maybe he was just really tired, maybe he just saw something totally innocuous and just freaked himself out, yada yada. But it wasn't just a one-time thing. There were other employees at the station who had also encountered a winged creature. Apparently there had even been a file opened on the thing. Just a few months before, Shaw saw it after 2 German shepherds at the station had been found completely torn apart, and they were found in the same area that Shaw saw the creature. At number 7, we have high altitude objects. So the story here is that several mysterious high altitude objects were down in February of 2023 over various airspaces. You probably remember this in the news. We had objects being spotted over Canada and the United States, Latin America, China, Eastern Europe. Started when several unidentified objects were down over Alaska, the Yukon, and Lake Huron. The general of NORAD, Glenn D. Van Herk, made a statement saying the objects could be benign, but wasn't 100% sure. When asked if they could be of alien origin, though, he said he wasn't ruling anything out. It literally seems like government and military agencies are just starting to become more open to the idea of extraterrestrial life, or maybe some of them already are fully aware of their presence. Either way, though,
It seems like they're being discussed openly more than ever before. It's not being written off as nonsense like it has been in the past. And here's another interesting part of these cases. There were recovery attempts made. Unfortunately, the objects landed in areas that aren't all that accessible though, so it made it pretty difficult, and the recovery missions were abandoned. Now, that's what they say, but what if the government did recover something that they just aren't ready or willing to show us? Who knows? At our number 6 spot, we have Oumuamua. This one's definitely been talked about plenty of times, including on this channel, but it's a recent article dated March 7th of this year that I'm mostly referring to. In a recent article written by Sean Kirkpatrick, head of the Pentagon's AARO, or All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which specializes in unidentified flying objects, and Harvard professor A.V. Loeb, they discussed the possibility that objects like Oumuamua spotted back in 2017 could be of alien origin. The article said that objects like the Oumuamua could be quote-unquote a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth. They didn't just discuss the Oumuamua though, they were looking at a variety of unidentified probes. And they went on to speculate that these crafts could potentially power their batteries from starlight, and that Earth's water could be fuel. There's some pretty wild stuff in there, and yes, a lot of it is speculative, but the fact that a highly respected scientist that spent 20 years studying physics is proposing these kinds of ideas, it's pretty fascinating. Coming at number 5, we have the Alaska sighting. The event began when Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a cargo plane, reported encountering an unidentified flying object during its flight. The pilot, Captain Kenju Taruchi, and his crew described seeing a massive disc-shaped object with glowing lights flying in close proximity to their aircraft while flying over Alaska. They also reported that the object displayed erratic movements, seemingly defying the laws of physics. Ground radar stations at Anchorage International Airport even tracked an unidentified craft that matched the flight's description. The radar data not only confirmed the presence of an unknown object, but also its proximity to the airplane. And after the incident, all of the data, including the radar records, was reportedly collected and presented at a meeting with officials from the FBI and the CIA. According to witnesses, these government agencies acknowledged the radar recording as evidence of a genuine UFO, but they later disavowed any knowledge of such a meeting. Number 4, the Richard French sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was an investigator for Project Blue Book in the 1950s. Long after retirement at a citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013, French made a shocking statement. His job had been to solve cases involving supposed UFOs, usually by debunking them, but as it turns out, he had actually seen one himself, although he hadn't included it in his report at the time. The 83-year-old described an incident that took place during an investigation off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland back in the day. 2 mysterious aircrafts had reportedly crashed into the water. He had followed a group of about 100 onlookers on a nearby wharf and described seeing 2 to 3 foot tall beings, thin and gray, looking to be repairing their vessels. He then watched in awe as the crafts rose out of the water before flying off at incredible speeds. Next up, we have the Phoenix Lights. On March 13th, 1997, in Phoenix, Arizona, USA, thousands of residents reported seeing a series of strange lights in the sky. The lights were described as bright and hovering slowly in a V-shaped formation. This event unfolded in 2 parts. First, there were reports of lights moving slowly across the state, from the northern to the southern region. Then, later in the evening, a stationary V-shaped formation appeared over Phoenix and lingered for several minutes before vanishing. The official explanation, initially attributed to the lights, was military flares being dropped during a training exercise, but this explanation didn't match the descriptions given by witnesses who reported a massive silent object blocking out the stars. Some speculated it was a UFO, while others believed it to be a secret military aircraft. At our number 2 spot, we have the Rendlesham Forest Incident. The Rendlesham Forest Incident, also known as Britain's Roswell, is one of the most well-documented UFO events in history. It occurred in late December of 1980 near Royal Air Force Woodridge, or RAF Woodridge, a U.S. Air Force base located in Suffolk, England. Over a couple nights, multiple military personnel reported encountering strange lights and objects in the forest adjacent to the base. On the night of December 26, 1980, U.S. Air Force personnel, including Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, investigated reports of unusual lights in Rendlesham Forest. They witnessed strange colored lights in the sky and on the ground. Halt recorded his observations on an audio tape describing the lights as red, green, and blue, and confirmed the presence of an unidentified craft. 2 nights earlier, on December 24, 1980, security personnel at RAF Woolridge reported seeing a triangular-shaped object with red and blue lights hovering above the forest. It appeared to land and leave impressions on the ground, and when radiation readings were allegedly taken at the site, it indicated unusually high levels. And finally, we have the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident, also known as the Washington Flap. During 2 consecutive weeks in July of 1952, a series of UFO sightings occurred in the airspace over Washington, D.C. On the night of July 19, 1952, radar operators at Washington National Airport detected a cluster of these unknown objects flying at very high speeds. Witnesses on the ground reported seeing bright lights moving erratically in the sky. Similar sightings recurred on the night of July 20th, prompting the U.S. Air Force to scramble fighter jets in pursuit of these objects. Pilots reported seeing the objects visually, describing them as glowing lights that defied the laws of physics with their sudden accelerations and maneuvers. The CIA took a keen interest in this case, conducting its own investigation. Declassified documents have since revealed that the CIA closely monitored the events and requested daily briefings on the sightings. To this day, these sightings have not been fully explained.
Number 10. 2 white lights. Okay, so this didn't happen in the States, but Canada. And all I'm saying is that Biden could get some info out of Mr. Trudeau if he really wanted to. On January 29, 2023, Canadian air traffic controllers and pilots couldn't identify 2 white lights moving in a circular pattern reported over Canada's Northwest Territories. Good evening, just wondering, do you got 2 planes that are just to the east of your field doing circuits or maneuvers? A crew member aboard the Canadian North Flight headed to Yellowknife asked their traffic controllers. Negative, I have no reported traffic in the area, the Yellowknife air traffic controller replied. Do you have a visual on something? The crew responded somewhat hesitantly, yeah, we're looking at 2 lights dancing around here to the east of your field. They're above us, about I don't know what. We're not seeing them on TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, but we can see the lights moving around. Then there's a pause before the crew member radios back to say, we're not crazy. No, we believe you, the air traffic controller replies, and the sighting remains unexplained. I need answers, people. Why are there just 2 random lights in the sky? Number 9. Over New Mexico. On February 21st, 2021, a pilot flying over New Mexico at an altitude of 37,000 feet reported seeing a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast over the top of them, according to the published audio. American Airlines confirmed that the radio transmission came from Flight 2292. The FAA a few days later stated a pilot reported seeing an object over New Mexico shortly after noon local time on Sunday, February 21st, 2021. FAA air traffic controllers did not see any object in the area on their radar scopes. Seems like air traffic control can never see these objects, but the pilots can, and I can't tell if that's better or worse. Number 8. Shot down object over Alaska. On February 10th, 2023, aka like a month ago, the US military shot down an unidentified airborne object over northeastern Alaska. US officials said they believed the object to be a balloon, but couldn't confirm it since it broke into pieces after hitting the ocean, the New York Times reported. How convenient. News outlets owned by the Chinese Communist Party said Biden's response has shown the world how immature and irresponsible the US has been in dealing with this case. Oof, even other people are criticizing him. Number 7. shot down object over Lake Huron. On February 12, 2023, just 2 days later, a US F-16 jet shot down an unidentified object over Lake Huron. An octagonal object with strings hanging from it was detected over northern Montana, Wisconsin, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at 20,000 feet. This was believed to be the same object tracked over Montana and monitored by the government the night before. Melissa Dalton, Assistant Defense Secretary of Homeland Defense, and General Glenn Venherk, head of U.S. North Command, say officials could not definitively assess what the objects were, so they acted out of an abundance of caution to protect U.S. security and interest. These most recent objects did not pose a military threat, but their path and proximity to sensitive DoD sites and the altitude that they were flying could be a hazard to civilian aviation and thus raise concerns, Melissa said. Operations are underway with multiple agencies, including the Coast Guard, to gather the object's remains and determine where it came from, they added. And when or if they figure out what it is, I wonder if they'll actually tell us. Probably not though. Number 6. Rosemount UFOs. A man living in Rosemount said he encountered a similar UFO on 4 separate occasions. On August 4th, 2017, the man was near his Rosemount home when he saw what he described as a black object with bright orange lights coming from the craft and flying over the area. Nearly a month later, on September 6, 2017, he saw 3 crafts with the same description hovering above downtown Rosemont. 2 days later, a singular craft returned to Inver Grove Heights, and he spotted the craft one last time on March 12, 2018. The man took photos or videos for each of the events and submitted it to the Mutual UFO Network. Seems like these aliens could have been stalking him, which I think is even more creepy. Number 5. Navy pilots. Recently, 2 former Navy pilots were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during a training exercise, but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. In an interview with NBC News, Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this little white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping-pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then, when the pilot decided to get within half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. I'm surprised the government even let them do this interview, but my question is, if he did get closer, what were they gonna do? Wave hi to the aliens? Number 4. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, with his own eyes, and he called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious objects spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects in our airspace. And these were not mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These were no mere balloons. They could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means to lift or control surfaces. In other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have as clear as an understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with. If we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear. If there are things over our head that we're not sure what they are, we need to figure it out. If they're adversarial, it's a national security issue. We have mechanisms for that. If it's not a national security issue, issue, and if it's not an adversarial platform, then it's a matter for scientific inquiry. Not gonna lie, this scares me a little. Number 3. Leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage, obtained by documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News, appeared to show the mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Alma's Combat Information Center, according to filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appeared to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San Diego before it just vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. The Defense Department confirmed that the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said that it will be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, a panel established last year to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects. Number 2. You saw something you shouldn't. In 2008, a large aircraft hovered above Stevensville, Texas. Many people in the community saw it, and according to the Mutual UFO Network, a pilot named Steve Allen reported that the unusual aircraft was flying at an estimated 3,000 miles per hour and was being chased by fighter jets. Then a man named Rick Sorrell said he saw the same thing while hunting. Later, Rick said a strange man knocked on his door and said, "Son, we have the same caliber weapons you have, but we have more of them. You need to shut your mouth about what you saw." Creepy. Was this the Men in Black, people from their government, or real aliens? Who knows, but if that happened to me, I think I'd move out of state. And coming in at number 1 is the Pentagon. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of news reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of these events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has received 366 reports of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred between March 2021 but hadn't been included in an earlier report. The new numbers indicate a steep rise in UAP sightings. The report released in June 2021 listed just 144 reports, covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to the US government efforts to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize the potential risk the phenomenon poses, both as an aviation hazard and potential adversarial activity, such as foreign surveillance efforts. I don't know though, it seems like they're really starting to believe in aliens to me. Coming in at number 10 is the orange disc. In 2020, a report of a UFO over the Vatican in 2007 came to life. UFO hunter Scott Waring believes the unidentified flying object's shape closely resembles a flying saucer. He said on his UFO Sightings daily blog, "This report is from 2007 but was just reported today at MUFON. An orange disc was caught in a photograph over Vatican City. UFOs have been seen over the Vatican before, but orange UFOs are usually seen in South America and Central America, so this is odd. The object is a disc viewed from the side. The disc doesn't have a classic hump, but instead its upper center comes to a point and lower center is flat, no bulge at all. For me, I can clearly see this is a disc. It's a little in focus, so it's not that far back. It looks to be about 10 meters, 33 feet across. If it was traveling fast, it may have gotten caught by accident. This is absolutely real and absolutely alien in origin." Then Scott said the Vatican's stance of alien life comes mostly from scientific analysis of chemicals, substances, and textbook strategies of old. Vatican astronomers would never confirm any UFO as being real unless it landed in Vatican City. Number 9. First crash ever. The world's first crash of an unidentified flying object, UFO, happened in Italy in 1933 during the reign of Benito Mussolini, Italian researcher Robert Pinotti claimed. Roberto spoke to the Daily Mail and even shared evidence to back his claims. Now, Roberto is the president of the National Ufological Center in Italy, and his research has been met with skepticism within Italy itself. Now, Roberto and his colleague have been working to learn more about the 1933 crash in Lombardy and received some original secret documents about it in 1996. The documents were sent to the researchers by an unidentified source who claimed to have inherited these from a relative who lived at the time and was part of the secret department allegedly set up by Mussolini to study the saucer. Now, the documents also include handwritten memos that have a sketch and description of the UFO with portholes on the side. Number 8. Donut UFO. In 1978, unidentified flying objects that gave off green, red, and white lights and had a donut-like hole in the middle were reported and in some cases photographed at dozens of places between Sicily and Milan in the north. It was reported by none other than the officers on duty in the operation of police headquarters. Dozens of people called, all with the same message. You see an enormous beam of green light just overhead. A lieutenant and non-commissioned officer, driven by curiosity, as they said later, ran out on the terrace and one exclaimed, "I see an enormous beam of green light." A bank clerk, Nino Raffagino, said he spotted an object just before midnight, made a dash for his 1000mm telephoto lens, and came up with a series of pictures that appeared in the press. One taken when the object was stationary, according to Nino, showed a disc of light with a hole in the middle. Officers that were alerted by citizens' calls also snapped pictures and sent them to the newspapers. Taken while the object appeared to be moving, they showed a long, wide streak of light in the dark sky. Number 7. Recent sighting. A low-quality blurred image said to depict a UFO or a weird object escorted by 2 military aircraft over northeastern Italy made the news. The photograph was published by some local media outlets, which reported that around 7:20 p.m. on March 23, 2021, several witnesses noticed 2 aircrafts coming from the southeast and heading northwest, escorting from distance what was described as a large square or diamond-shaped object which incorporated from 10 to 12 fixed yellow lights. According to the reports, the object traveled very fast and left behind an intense trail, and the only noise that was perceived was that of the 2 planes flying at a lower altitude than the square object at a much lower speed. 1.5 minutes was the average duration of these sightings, enough to spark discussion of what this mysterious object was. So much so, the photograph was also brought to the attention of the Italian for National UFO Center, which started its own investigation. Number 6. 22nd sighting. There are episodes in Italy which whole crowds have witnessed inexplicable phenomena. On October 13, 2016, a series of people spotted a UFO in the sky over Geneva. The sighting lasts for 20 seconds, and there are those who had time to take photos or videos from different points in the city. The Air Force was contacted immediately, but no trace of the object was found in radar tracks. It seems like we'll never know what this strange object was, but I believe the people who saw it. Number 5. Pilot discovery. On June 18, 1979, the then pilot Marshal Giancarlo Sansoni was returning from a photographic survey. Giancarlo, who belonged to the 14 group of the 2 fighter-bomber reconnaissance wing of the Italian Air Force, was on board a G91R equipped with 4 Vitin cameras located in this way: 2 on the sides of the front of the cockpit, 1 in the front position, and the 4th at the ventral position. With these, he had carried out the photographic surveys that he had been in charge of, but while flying, he saw something strange. He then arranged with the ground control body staff to go and identify an object that was detected by the radar. At the moment of the sighting, it occurred to him that it could be a solar UFO, but then he realized it was something different. The day was beautiful, and he soon realized that the black spot had very different characteristics. It appeared to him in the shape of a dull black fuel tank, and on its slightly flattened upper part, he noticed a fairing with 2 mustaches. This was underlying something clear and white light, which in his opinion was a kind of milky white dome. The characteristics of the surface did not allow the refraction of light, and the object appeared to have a length of about 6 to 8 meters and a width of about 3 meters. Now during the sighting, which lasted about 5 minutes, Giancarlo was able to take more than 80 photographs that showed the object was always in the same frontal position or slightly angled. In fact, this thing was never completely visible from the side, and it was as if the thing wanted to aim the plane. Number 4. Factory worker. On April 24th, 1950, a factory worker named Bruno Facciani was working the late shift and stepped outside to get some fresh air on his break. Investigating a bright glowing light, which he thought was a part of a factory transformer problem, he was shocked to see a circular shape glowing object with a ladder descended from its bottom. At the top of the UFO was a greenish glow which partially obscured a light-skinned being. The unusual being appeared to be welding something on the craft. Then he said several other small alien creatures emerged from the craft, and in a moment or two the ladder began to be drawn up into the mysterious craft, and the beings began to re-enter the craft through an invisible door of some kind. The full realization of what he was witnessing sent Bruno to run away from the frightening encounter. Now as he fled, he heard a sound like that of a large beehive. One of the remaining creatures pointed a type of weapon at him, and a beam of force knocked him to the ground. Although in pain, he was able to watch the aliens as they prepared the craft to take off. The beehive-like sound increased as the object made its way into the skies and vanished from view. Now the next day, Bruno made a full report of his encounter to the police force, and there were signs still visible of the activities of the night before. Police found burn patches on the ground and indentation marks of an extremely heavy object. They also found some odd green pieces of a metal-like substance. Number 3. Green Alien. On the night of December 6, 1978, night watchman Pierre Zanfretta was on a routine patrol when he stumbled into a series of terrifying encounters with extraterrestrial beings. His car inexplicably lost power en route to a client's unoccupied home. He then glanced through his window and saw 4 lights moving in the garden of the house he was coming to inspect. Assuming that the beams were coming from burglars, he climbed from his car with his revolver and flashlight in hand. Now just as he prepared to leap out to confront these trespassers, he felt something touch his shoulder from behind. Pierre spun around, but instead of finding a human criminal, he saw an entity that he described as being an enormous green, ugly, and frightful creature with undulating skin as though they were very fat or dressed in a loose gray tunic no less than 10 feet tall. It was flanked by 2 similar beasts. He said these beings were hairy, had greenish skin, had horns on the sides of their faces, yellow triangular eyes, and red veins embedded in their foreheads. He also described a unique self-illuminated mechanical apparatus that fit over their mouths. Now he was so shocked that he ran away, and I think that was the best option. Number 2. The abduction. In April 1962, Taylor Mario Zicala was walking home through the woods when, at a crossroad clearing where the path crossed a small canal, he felt himself struck by a sharp gust of wind. The object, like an inverted bowl, passed overhead and came close to the ground about 6 to 7 meters away. From its underside came a cylinder which opened up, revealing a diffuse of white light from which 2 beings emerged. They were 1.5 meters tall, dressed in metallic suits, wearing helmets with antennas. He then approached Mario and led him into the empty interior of the object, which was lit by the same diffuse light. He was unable to make out any details of the interior. They then let go of him as a voice from the inner part of the object, like one amplified by a microphone and as if resounding in a vast space, spoke to him in Italian. The only part Mario could remember was a message that at the 4th moon they would return at 1 in the morning to give him a message for humanity. He was then escorted out of the object and somehow found himself outside his own door. His wife heard 4 loud knocks, which he does not remember making, and found him terrified on the front porch. And coming in at number 1 is the whistleblower. Pentagon whistleblower David Grush, in some more baffling claims, said the Vatican was fully aware of non-human intelligence's existence and that it assisted the United States in retrieving a UFO. Making some shocking revelations, David stated that a top-secret UFO retrieval program was run by the United States for decades, and added that the Vatican was involved in the first ever crash of a UFO, as per media reports. David stated that the UFO's first recovery took place place in Magenta, Italy in 1933. He added that the UFO was in possession of Italian dictator Mussolini's government until 1944 to 1945, when America was tipped off by it by Pope Pius XII. He added that the UFO was partially intact and was kept at a secure airbase until it was retrieved by the US after the fascist Italy's regime collapse. 1933 was the first recovery in Europe in Magenta, Italy. They recovered a partially intact vehicle and the Italian government moved it to a secure airbase in Italy until around 1944 to 1945. The Pope back-channeled that and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it, David said. While clarifying whether the Catholic Church knew about the non-human existence on Earth, David said, certainly. He said that his claims must be believed because I have the credentials and I was an intelligence officer. He stated that UFO sightings were widely known during Mussolini's dictatorship in Italy.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Russian UFO. Just yesterday, Russia saw some kind of unidentified flying object overhead, and it caused them to need to shut down their airspace over one of their biggest cities. Passenger planes from Pulkovo Airport in St. Petersburg were grounded after the reports of a mysterious object started coming out. The military ordered the closure in order to not only investigate, but also to try and keep everybody safe. Right now, the best guess as to what this UFO could have been is likely a drone, with officials saying the object was heading towards the Gulf of Finland, but even if it was just a drone, they have yet to decipher where it came from or what its purpose was. Apparently, Russian officials haven't yet confirmed that there really was a UFO, but they did confirm the closure of the airport. Russian citizens also got quite a fright when they received alerts claiming an air raid was taking place and they were told to seek shelter immediately, but officials later claimed that the alert was quote fake and it is suspected to have been a hacking attack. In our number 9 spot today we have the UFO convoy. This sighting comes from someone on Reddit who swears that they passed a UFO in transport and they even have the videos to prove it. Their post reads, quote, backstory, I was coming from LA and after passing Bakersfield, the freeway started to slow down and traffic started to pile up. Once I got close to the source of the traffic, I decided to record what was going on. I was able to record what looked like a UFO saucer-shaped object. However, I did pass by it fairly quickly. Once I passed it, I kept questioning myself, what did I just see? But I decided to brush it off thinking it might be replica for some UFO carnival or alien event. After passing the UFO about 5 miles out, I decided to take an exit and use the bathroom. After the restroom break, I got back onto the freeway the exact same time as the convoy with the UFO was passing me while I was entering the freeway. I was not able to make a video of that specific moment. Once I was on the freeway, I saw 2 vehicles blocking each lane going CA5 north. Both cars seemed to have federal license plates. As well, ahead of them was a convoy of 2 CHP trucks with their lights on blocking both lanes. Ahead of the 2 CHP trucks was the big rig hauling the alleged UFO, and in front of it were 2 more CHP officers. Though I was able to make a video of the convoy as it was exiting the freeway, and when I looked at it under more light, I was amazed to see something so similar to a UFO. Again, I'm not clearly sure what I saw, but with all the circumstances and what was occurring in that moment, it seemed to be a UFO. Also, when shooting the last part of the video, the federal agent in the white pickup truck seemed to speed up and block my view of recording. At first I thought, why would they not cover it up if it was a real UFO of types? But then I thought, maybe that's the whole plan. Hide it in plain sight. It's very sneaky, alright? In our number 8 spot today we have the advanced technology. So this UFO sighting comes from a while ago, but it just recently became relevant, and that is because some former US Air Force personnel have begun explaining to the Pentagon that they believe back in the 60s there were UFOs that supposedly had the ability to turn off their nuclear warheads. Apparently these officers recently told this to the government's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, who had contacted former Air Force ICBM launch officer Robert Salas to get information about the encounter with an orange flying disc that switched off 10 warheads at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in 1967. There was another former officer, Dr. Robert Jacobs, who also apparently told the AARO that he had gone as far as to make a film of the UFO for the Air Force in 1964, and that this film captured images of a UFO shooting a test missile out of the sky. With the peaking fleeting interest in UFOs and the potential for an advanced civilization apart from our own, it appears as though the government is spending more time now researching and looking into these claims because, well, why would they make them up and continue on with the same story some 50 years later? In our number 7 spot today, we have the Texas 2022 UFO. This UFO video came from Reddit and was posted by the user SolarBoy1. With the video, they posted the statement that came from the girl who had sent them the video. The statement reads, quote, "This happened at 5:09 a.m. I was not about to go out there when I wasn't even dressed and I was scared. People always think they would have done things differently if it was them, but you never know what you'll do when you are actually having that experience. I always thought I would be doing the most to get a better view and record, but my anxiety was triggered and I could not go back to sleep after that. I was only recording to show my boyfriend, who was awake at the time since he works night shift. Pretty much disappeared after I don't know where it went. I honestly felt in that moment that they knew I was watching them when the light shined towards me. It was so bright. That's when I got really scared. I have a Tia that's kinda psychic, like she just always knows things and sees stuff, and she called me right after it happened because I sent the video in our family group chat. She said we are going to start seeing UFOs more often in this new year and that they are going to reveal themselves more. I know I don't know her, but I fully trust this lady's aunt. I feel like she knows something, and considering this was before all of the UFO panic in the last few weeks, it seems like she really was onto something. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Las Vegas UFO. Back in December of 2022, just a couple days before Christmas, residents and visitors in Las Vegas were stunned as they looked up to the sky and saw something none of them had ever seen before. It appears as though an object with big glowing lights on it was hovering in place just above the clouds. Not only this, but the moving lights from the Las Vegas Strip, every time they ran past this object, rather than illuminating it, it seemed as though the object just reflected the light in a very odd way you wouldn't necessarily expect. Of course, Reddit blew up with videos and photos and questions and theories, and there is a leading theory, but I personally am not totally convinced. Basically, they say that this was all due to a really rare phenomena that is almost never seen in Las Vegas except for somehow that night. Basically, they say that the weird lights and reflection and everything is just a result of ice crystals hanging in the air. Of course, I'm sure there's a more sciencey explanation, but to me, this all just seems a little too convenient. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Rendlesham Forest incident. This incident is often referred to as Britain's Roswell incident, and it took place in December of 1980. The incident took place in the Rendlesham Forest, which is a pine forest in England that, at the time, sat in between two United States Air Force bases, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. Over several nights around this time of year, a number of credible military personnel reported strange and colorful lights both above as well as in the forest. Some of those who were sent to investigate the strange lights reported seeing a triangular craft at close range, and there was even a famous audio tape made of the encounter. After these happenings, the UK Ministry of Defence claimed that the incident posed no threat to national security, and because of that, it was never investigated further. What really happened in the forest all of those years ago remains a total mystery, but those who actually witnessed the lights in the aircraft are said to have remained totally baffled. In our number 4 spot today, we have the New Jersey UFO. This UFO sighting took place in 2001 just above the New Jersey Turnpike. On July 14th, 2001, just after midnight, for around 15 minutes, motorists driving down this highway stopped to stare at the sky to witness what no one could believe. There were strange orange and yellow lights in a V formation just above the Arthur Kill waterway. There were a ton of witnesses who were all extremely confused and shocked as to what they were seeing. Air traffic controllers initially denied that there were any flying objects that could have caused the mysterious lights, but a group that is called the New York Strange Phenomena Investigators claimed that they received radar data that night that would corroborate the story that the witnesses were telling. It may not have been aliens, but it certainly was some sort of unidentified flying object that no one had ever seen before, and there were people from all walks of life witnessing it together. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Belgium wave. Nearing the end of November of 1989, citizens of Belgium were shocked to report seeing a big triangular UFO hovering in the sky. Aside from these reports from the visual witnesses, however, there wasn't any physical evidence supporting the existence of the UFO. Flash forward to a few months later in March of 1990, and new sightings began to pop up, but this time their presence was being confirmed, this time by 2 military ground radar stations. Here's where things get really strange though. 2 F-16 fighter jets were sent out to investigate what was going on, and this is when the pilots found that they couldn't see anything visually, but their radars were able to spot the target. While trying to keep track of these objects, the UFOs were just moving way too fast, and the pilots ended up losing track of them. In the end, there were about 13,500 people who witnessed this UFO incident, which has made it one of the most widely experienced UFO sightings of the modern era. The Belgian Air Force had no idea what it was that was witnessed, but they thankfully did acknowledge that some sort of unknown activity had taken place, instead of just trying to sweep it under the rug and pretend like nothing happened. In our number 2 spot today, we have the cylinder UFO. This UFO sighting doesn't really come with a crazy story or anything, but the video truly does speak for itself. It's weird, and if I saw this on an afternoon with a perfectly clear sky, I would probably take my phone out and start recording as well. The video was taken in the summer of 2021 around noon one day by Reddit user I Broke the Box. The video shows them zooming in and out on some kind of object that is flying through the sky, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. I don't know if you've ever had like a floater in your eye before, but at first it kind of looks like that, like some weird cylinder just floating around. But the appearance changes slightly when it seems like maybe the sun is reflecting off of it. People in the replies have tried to speculate over what it could be that is in this video, but no one is entirely sure, so I have to ask, what do you think it is? In our number 1 spot today, we have Flight 1628. Back on November 17th, 1986, Japan Airlines cargo flight 1628 was flying from Paris to an airport near Tokyo when they had a very strange UFO encounter. On the part of the flight where they were over Alaska around 1711, the crew witnessed 2 unidentified objects to the left of their craft. The 2 objects rose up quite quickly to meet the craft and continued to fly alongside it. Each object had 2 rectangular things that are said to have appeared to be some sort of glowing nozzles or thrusters, but the crew on the plane couldn't see much else. They weren't able to see if there was anyone or anything inside. The closer these objects came to the plane, the more light was let inside, so much so that at the closest points the plane's cabin was totally lit up, and the captain even said he could feel the heat from the lights on his face. After this, the 2 objects left, but this was not the end, because a third, much larger disc-shaped object showed up and started following the plane. In the end, the plane needed to make an emergency landing in Anchorage, Alaska, because this third craft was seriously large and incredibly frightening, and they just needed to figure out what was going on. The plane landed successfully and investigations were conducted, but to this day, no one is exactly sure what the men on board saw, but the entire crew witnessed the exact same thing. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Valençol incident. Everywhere's gotta have their Roswell incident, and this one is said to be France's. This sighting was made by a man named Maurice Masse, who is a French farmer, and it took place in July of 1965. One day, before starting work while outside smoking, Maurice witnessed an object coming out of the sky and landing in his lavender field about 200 feet away from where he was. He was, of course, frustrated at someone landing in his field and figured that it was likely a helicopter that made some sort of unauthorized landing, but as he got closer, things took quite the turn. He realized this was no helicopter and instead was some sort of oval-shaped structure that was standing on 4 legs. In front of the strange craft were 2 figures just under 4 feet tall. He explained that they were making a sort of grumbling sound and included a brief description of these creatures before explaining that one of them took out a pencil-like device and pointed it at him, which left him completely stuck in his tracks, just frozen in time. As he was stuck there, the creatures got back on their craft and took off, and after about 20 minutes, he finally regained his ability to move. Here's the thing, to me this just sounds like a fantastical story, but there was some kind of physical evidence left behind that I, and many others, can't quite figure out an explanation to. Basically, the craft did end up leaving a mark. There was a hole and a lot of moisture left over from where the craft was. Like I mentioned, this was in the middle of a lavender field. Soon after this area became really hard, almost like concrete, and definitely not like the soil everywhere else in the field, and all of the plants around this area started to die. Analysis of the soil revealed that there was a higher amount of calcium in the soil at the landing site than there was anywhere else. This definitely shows that there was some kind of unusual event, but could Maurice be telling the truth? In our number 9 spot today, we have the Broadhaven UFO sightings. This UFO sighting took place all the way back in 1977, and it started when an entire class of children all claimed to see some sort of object flying through the sky. The children rightfully were confused and excited over what they had seen, but of course the teachers and adults around them believed it was just their wild imaginations making it up. This is when they decided to split all of the children up and have them draw what it is that they saw. While there of course were variations in all of the children's drawings, they all were basically the same thing, which begs the question, did they all really see this thing then? The children weren't the only ones who saw it either. Shortly after their sighting, other local residents began to explain that they had seen something strange flying through the air, including one hotel owner. One of the things that really gets people about this case and these sightings in particular is that all these different people claimed to have seen something at that time, and even though it's been almost half a century, not a single one of them has ever said that it was a hoax or that they were lying about what they saw. They all have the same story they did the day that it happened. In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Grudge Report 13. Okay, so I've read quite a few different UFO sighting stories and stories of alleged alien abductions, and this is fully one of the most terrifying that I have ever heard of. So basically, the story starts off in March of 1956 when Air Force Sergeant Jonathan P. Lovett was assisting Major William Cunningham in the White Sands Missile Testing Grounds near Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The pair were out searching for debris from a recent rocket test when Major Cunningham heard a loud scream. His first thought was that Sergeant Lovett had been bitten by a snake, so he went around to help aid his partner when he allegedly saw something he never expected. He recounted seeing the sergeant being dragged away by some sort of long serpentine arm that had wrapped around his legs. Whatever this creature was, it was connected to a hovering silver disc that was in the air about 15 feet away. The major stood there in horror as he watched this creature and the sergeant retreat into the craft, which then rose vertically into the sky. Of course, he radioed for help, and while he was taken to the hospital for observation, search teams were sent out immediately. It wouldn't happen until 3 days later that they would find the body of Sergeant Lovett only 10 miles from the site where he was said to have disappeared from. The autopsy performed on him later also only raised more questions than answers, as his body was severely harmed. So of course there was an investigation that happened, and many people claim this investigation was detailed in a 600-page document labeled Project Grudge Report 13, but the problem with this is that no official information on Report 13 exists, and the US government denies its very existence. Though Grudge Reports 1 through 12 have been declassified, along with Report 14, no official mention or accounting of Report 13 exists, and the story solely relies on secondhand accounts of the horrible incident. In our number 7 spot today, we have Levelland. This incident took place in 1957 in Levelland, Texas, and actually was the inspiration for a scene in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the real-life incident, dozens of citizens from across the city began individually reporting seeing a rocket or a strange set of lights or some sort of unidentified object, but that wasn't it. Whatever these citizens were seeing was also reportedly interfering with their vehicles as well. Engines were just suddenly dying out and lights were cutting off. If this happened to just 1 or 2, this could have been some kind of strange coincidence, but it was way too many instances. Something else definitely had to have been at play. The authorities at first thought that the reports were a hoax until they too saw the strange lights as they began to investigate. This is where Project Blue Book came in to investigate, and they came up with quite the conclusion. They claimed that what had happened here was simply just a case of an electrical storm and ball lightning that caused the lights and the mechanical malfunctions. That's super reasonable, but the catch with this explanation is that there were no reported thunderstorms in the area that night at all. I'm just saying, something here clearly isn't adding up quite right. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Air Force disappearance. On the night of November 23rd, 1953, near the Canadian-US border, the United States Air Defense Command noticed a blip on their radar where there shouldn't have been one. This was showing that there was some sort of unidentified object that was in restricted airspace over Lake Superior. In response to this, an F-89C Scorpion jet was sent to investigate with 2 crew members. First Lieutenant Felix Moncla was piloting the craft, while Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson was observing the radar. Once in the air, the pair had trouble tracking the object, which kept changing its course, which then led to ground control helping to direct them. The jet pursued the unknown object for 30 minutes as it closed in on it at 500 miles per hour. After a while, the 2 blips on the radar, one being the unknown object and the other being the investigating jet, converged into one point, and then suddenly the radar return from the F-89 simply just disappeared from ground control's radar scope. Shortly after this, the radar blip that was from the unidentified object also veered off and then vanished. The men who were sent to investigate in the jet never returned from the mission, and there was never any wreckage found signifying an accident despite extensive searches. The men and the jet just disappeared completely. It is said that the explanations for the disappearance that have been released throughout the years have changed and flip-flopped in what they say happened, so at this point no one has any idea what truly happened here. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Roswell incident. This whole rigmarole started in 1946 1947 when some sort of a crash took place near a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. Shortly after this, the Roswell Army Airfield released a statement saying that they had recovered a flying disc from the ranch, but the Army quickly retracted the statement and said that it wasn't that, but instead was a conventional weather balloon. This was a little sketchy, but most people just let it slide until the 1970s. What happened in the 70s is that a retired lieutenant colonel began to speak out. In an interview with a UFO researcher, he said that the weather balloon story was a cover-up and that alien remains were actually recovered from the crash site. There were both first and second-hand witnesses who claimed that not only were there at least one, but possibly more alien spacecrafts that had crashed at the scene, but also that extraterrestrial remains were also recovered by the military, who then began to engage in a cover-up. In 1994, the story changed from a weather balloon to nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul, and it was stated that the stories of the alien bodies were probably just test dummies that had been dropped from high altitudes. I'm not gonna lie, this whole thing sounds a little sketchy. I obviously wasn't there, so I can't say for certain what happened, but someone is definitely lying about it. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Foo Fighters. On a late November evening in 1944, nearing the end of the Second World War, Lieutenant Fred Ringwald was riding as observer in a night fighter that was being piloted by Lieutenant Ed Schluter with Lieutenant Donald J. Myers on radar. The men were in the Rhine Valley, which sits north of Strasbourg on the French and German border, when Lieutenant Ringwald saw something. He said, quote, "I wonder what those lights are over there in the hill." When the rest turned to look, they saw 8 to 10 fiery orange glowing lights. They checked with the ground radar, but nothing was registering. The men thought that there was a chance that these lights could be some kind of air weapon, so they turned themselves to be ready to fight, only to have the lights suddenly vanish. The 3 men who experienced the strange lights at first didn't tell anyone about what they saw because they feared being ostracized by those around them. This all changed, however, when stories of similar sightings began to spread through their unit. As it would turn out, many other pilots and flight crews experienced these same orange glowing lights, and one pilot even experienced a strange cigar-shaped flying object in this scenario. In this instance, the UFO was described as, quote, "a wingless cigar-shaped object glowing red just a few yards off the plane's wingtip." Lieutenant Krasny, justifiably spooked, instructed the pilot to attempt evasive maneuvers, but the glowing object stayed right next to the jet for several minutes before it, quote, "flew off and disappeared." Throughout the years, the explanations for what these people saw have ranged from things like combat fatigue to the works of Nazi astrophysicists, so at this point, what exactly happened here remains quite a mystery. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Shag Harbor incident. This UFO encounter is often referred to as Canada's Roswell, so I was shocked that I hadn't heard of it before. Basically, this incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claimed to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting on their porch, but the 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing it. Shortly after they noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy saw 4 blips on his Decca radar that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't the only one who saw it on board. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP, but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. But it was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were totally accounted for. So what could these witnesses have all seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents it is listed as a UFO. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Betty and Barney Hill case. The Betty and Barney Hill case is definitely one of the most famous UFO abduction stories ever told, and it absolutely has some pretty compelling components. Basically, the story goes that the 2 were driving on a road in New Hampshire one night on the way home from a trip the pair had taken. Before they got into the car on their way home, home, they were in a diner and figured that if they really pushed through, they could beat the wind and rains from an approaching hurricane. It was 10 p.m. when they left the diner, and they figured by around 2 a.m., 3 a.m. latest, they'd arrive home. As they drove, out of nowhere, a bright light started to follow them. Suddenly, they arrive home and it's somehow daylight, and their clothes are dirty and ripped, and their watches had stopped working. This is all jarring enough, but neither Betty nor Barney could figure out what happened. They were both missing time. Later, during a session with a psychiatrist, they were able to recall being touched by aliens during their abduction. Project Blue Book would come to investigate their claims, and while people remain skeptical, no one has ever been able to debunk their story. This officially went on to become the first ever widely publicized abduction story, and to this day, people still debate what really happened to the hills. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Westall incident. Taking it back to 1966, we have the largest mass UFO sighting in Australia that, at the time, was largely ignored. This incident took place when over 300 students and staff members of a school in Melbourne all witnessed multiple UFOs silently flying through the air before they landed in a nearby field. Well, there's been a ton of speculation about this incident in the many years it's been. One witness account stands out among the rest, and that is the account made by the science teacher from the school, Andrew Greenwood. He was alerted to the UFO event by a hysterical student, and when he went outside to see for himself, everything changed. Previously a skeptic of UFO stories, Andrew's mind was abruptly changed when he saw, as he described it, a round silver object about the size of a car with a metal rod sticking up in the air. He went on to explain that suddenly 5 planes came and surrounded the object, all while more people were gathering to watch. He called what happened next the most amazing flying he had ever seen, explaining that, quote, every time they got too close to the object, it would slowly accelerate and rapidly accelerate and then move away from them and stop. Then they would take off after it again and the same thing would happen. This went on for about 20 minutes before the mysterious object just vanished. As weird as this all was, what was almost weirder was what happened next. Firstly, the headmaster of the school is said to have tried to put a stop to anyone talking about the incident at all, threatening severe punishment to any student or staff who was caught speaking about it, and when the Royal Australian Air Force contacted him, he refused to talk to them about it. There have also been stories of witnesses getting visits from people warning them not to speak of the incident. Andrew explained, quote, when he asked the physical education teacher to describe what she had seen herself so that he could compare it with his own observation, she just wouldn't say anything. Another witness who did talk to Andrew and described what she had seen in great detail, just 30 minutes later refused to speak to him and wouldn't say a word. Was this because of the threats from the headmaster, or was something else going on here? This is definitely a strange UFO story that leaves behind a lot of questions. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Lake Huron UFO. Just this past weekend, on Sunday, February 12th, US officials were able to confirm that the Air Force and the National Guard had downed a UFO that was seen over Lake Huron, which has a shoreline that is shared by the US state Michigan as well as the Canadian province of Ontario, where I am right now. Representative Alyssa Slotkin, a Michigan Democrat, not only confirmed the downing, but also took to Twitter to write, quote, great work by all who carried out this mission both in the air and back at headquarters. We're all interested in exactly what this object was and its purpose. Of course, this only worked to fuel rumors over what exactly this UFO could actually be or where it came from. The Department of Defense is said to have been tracking the flying object for some time before it decided that action needed to be taken in order to get the object out of airspace. So far, while there still hasn't been any confirmations of what exactly this object was, it has been described as a, quote, octagonal structure. Right now, recovery efforts of the debris is underway, but as of filming this, there have been no official reports of what exactly this UFO might have been or where it came from. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Yukon UFO. On Saturday, February 11th, just a day before the Lake Huron UFO, a US fighter jet shot down this unidentified flying object that was in the skies above Yukon, a Canadian territory. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took to Twitter to let Canadians know that he had ordered the, quote, takedown of an unidentified object that violated Canadian airspace. In an effort to take down the UFO, both Canadian and US aircrafts were scrambled, and Air Force members took to the sky to execute the successful downing of the object. Canadian forces are now working to recover and analyze the wreckage of this UFO to hopefully identify its origin. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, also known as NORAD, had initially detected the object flying at a high altitude over Alaska on Friday evening, and on Saturday is when it crossed into Canadian airspace. Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder explained that, quote, a US F-22 shot down the object in Canadian territory using an AIM-9X missile following close coordination between US US and Canadian authorities. Both Canadians and Americans are on high alert with this UFO, considering it is just one of the many that have been taken out of airspace in the last couple weeks alone. Like I mentioned before, right now the Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are working on recovering the wreckage, but the FBI will also be working closely with the RCMP during the investigation. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Alaska UFO. Okay, we're doing like a reverse timeline for these few points because now we are talking about the Alaska UFO that was shot down one day before the Yukon UFO. It was like Alaska, Yukon, Lake Huron. On February 10th, an F-22 US fighter jet shot down an unidentified object over the waters near Alaska. The object was said to have been caught flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and was deemed a quote reasonable threat to aviation, which is why the orders were given to take it down. The object was first detected the day before and a flyby happened on the Thursday it was seen, before the second flyby and takedown which took place on the Friday. Here's where things get really suspicious though. The pilots who were sent up to investigate and take down the UFO all gave differing reports of what it was that they saw. Some of the pilots even say that the UFO interfered with their sensors, and others claimed that they couldn't see any kind of propulsion system on the object, which poses the question, how could it have possibly been just casually cruising 40,000 feet in the air? In a statement over the weekend, the US Northern Command said that they have no new information about the object's quote capabilities, purpose, or origin, and they also explained that the recovery efforts are being slowed down by the icy conditions in the region. The National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby, said of the object, quote, "We're calling this an object because that's the best description we have right now." He continued to say, quote, "We don't know who owns it, whether it's state-owned or corporate-owned or privately owned, we just don't know." People are especially concerned about this UFO in particular because of the important military sites in Alaska, as well as its very close proximity to its neighboring countries. In our number 7 spot today, we have the balloon. On February 4th, it became public knowledge that officials were monitoring a strange object in the sky that they claimed had entered airspace above Alaska on January 28. They monitored the object as it later drifted from Idaho southeast to the Carolinas before the decision was made to take it down. This operation was carried out and the object was shot down. As it turns out, this object was realized to be some kind of a balloon. The balloon is said to have been about the size of 3 buses, and it was flying at an altitude of around 60,000 to 65,000 feet. Authorities were able to discover that the origin of this object was from China, but there are conflicting accounts of what its purpose might have been. China has maintained that the device was a civilian aircraft that strayed into American airspace, but senior American officials are seemingly believing that the balloon was originally supposed to conduct surveillance. Many believe that the spying was to be done over US military bases in Guam and Hawaii, but winds carried it off course to Alaska, Canada, and finally the United States mainland, where it was then shot down. Whatever this balloon was for, I'm just glad that we know what this one was and where it had come from, because some of these other recent UFOs are just too mysterious. In our number 6 spot today, we have the classified report. We are just scratching the surface of our time in 2023, but already there are some crazy announcements, including one regarding a report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there has been a total of 510 quote unidentified aerial phenomena observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which, quote, appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilot. Here's the thing, what we as the public know is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual real secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise, one day we'll find out. In our number 5 spot today, we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up the from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over top of us." After this, he followed up with, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over the top of us. Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen more often than any of us really know, and it is possible that the object could have been a part of some covert military or navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this is one of those stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened here. In our number 4 spot today, we have the 2023 sighting. This UFO video was taken recently on January 22nd, and the video was posted to Reddit by a user called MaxKeller96, and with the video, they gave some context. Quote, "My sister, dad, and I were out hiking near Picket Post when one of us noticed something glimmering near the mountain, so we stopped to look at it. All I could really make out is that it was a small bright dot in the sky. After a good 15 seconds of staring at it, just silently hanging in the air, trying to figure out what the was, I started recording. Sorry it's shaky, I could barely see my phone screen and was trying to get a good look at it with my own eyes. It then dropped 2 flare-looking things, though my sister swears she counted at least 3, and then it instantly sped off, heading south-ish. Up until that point, I thought it might have been a helicopter or a drone, as there's a lot of military/Air Force-based stuff out here, but there's no way anything can accelerate that fast. We all lost sight of it nearly instantly after the video cuts, and we were all properly freaked out about it. I've replayed the video probably 100 times and tried showing it to everyone I know, and no one had any idea what it could be other than a super high-end drone. If you think you know, please let me know. After watching the video also probably 100 times, I can definitely say that I have no idea what they all saw that day, because I also really don't think it was a drone. I also have to say that this video even gathered people together on Reddit, and that is no easy feat. Redditors are ruthless, and often very skeptical, and still people are pretty on board and confused over what this could have been. In our number 3 spot today, we have the USS Princeton UFO. This UFO sighting comes from 2004, but footage of it was released in 2017. On November 14th of 2004, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out around 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Black Aces Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 went over in 2 fighter jets in order to kind of scope out the situation, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it, like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust, which is especially peculiar when we think of what the pilots who just shot down the Alaska UFO said. No propulsion, right? Gives me chills just thinking about it, because how could that be possible? The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. Like, when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. Faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what this was, because it definitely seems like we don't have the technology to make this sort of thing possible. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Chicago UFO. This UFO sighting comes from November 7th, 2006, and it was at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Flight 446 was getting ready to head to North Carolina when an employee from United Airlines that was on the tarmac noticed a dark gray metallic aircraft hovering over one of the gates. After this, 11 other employees and even a few people who didn't work there saw this gray saucer floating at around 4:15 p.m. The people who saw it explained that it hovered above the gate for about 5 minutes before it just shot itself upwards and broke through the clouds, leaving a hole in the clouds where you could see the blue sky through. The strangest thing, however, is that this flying saucer did not show up on the radar, so the Federal Aviation Administration just called it a weather phenomena and would not investigate it, despite there being around 15 witnesses who all saw exactly the same thing. This story did, however, become one of the most read stories on the Chicago Tribune's website, and even went international because it certainly is very interesting. And finally, in our number 1 spot, we have the Stephenville UFO. In January of 2008, in the small town of Stephenville, Texas, a bunch of residents all saw something in the sky that they couldn't believe. In the beginning, it appeared to be white lights in the sky that were first in a single arc, but then they quickly moved to form two parallel lines. It was estimated that the lights were spanning about a mile long and half a mile wide. The craziest part is that it was flying at 3,000 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed of a fighter jet, but there was no sound reported at all. The government chalked this sighting up to the US Air Force flight operation, but many of the residents who saw this event on that day were absolutely not convinced and truly felt like they were lied to. Some even explained that what they saw was too technologically advanced for the human civilization.
Number 10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought like we're under attack by aliens. It was scary." Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like limp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earliest photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival. As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sighting, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage Country in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and second deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spar and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spar began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer pulled into a gas station, where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that. Number 5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents, as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser's spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom, on October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and dropped below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright-Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit hit the ground and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now, the majority of these reports come from Northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now, if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio?